Hey everybody, Hoosier Jedi here with another review for you. And this time I'm going to be talking about episode 14 of season 1 of Green Lantern, the animated series, and this one's called The New Guy. Now, this is of course a little bit of a pun on the introduction of our new major character, none other than Guy Gardner, a very venerable DC character. He's been around since the mid to late 1980s, I believe. But anyway, he's a somewhat divisive character among Green Lantern fans. You know, he's a real love him or hate him kind of character. But the truth is, I think the vast majority of Green Lantern fans really do enjoy Guy, and I know I certainly do. And the main thing that Guy is well known for, as you can sort of see in this episode, is basically being a dick. Now, to be perfectly fair here, the guy that we're seeing here on the animated show is actually a much more mellow fellow than he was in the comics. But again, to be completely fair to the comics, Guy has also mellowed a lot over the years. If you go back and read some of the uh, Justice League stories from where he really got established back in the late 1980s under the pen of the very talented writer Keith Giffen, yeah, Guy was really just an absolutely unbearable jerk. One of the most best known examples is he takes fellow superhero Ice out on a date to a porno theater. Yeah, if you're not familiar with what New York was like in 1988, Times Square was basically filled with porno theaters and hookers. Of course, that was also a shout out to the movie Taxi Driver. But the real moment that shines for Guy, most people who, when they think of Guy Gardner and his rather dickish attitude, is, and this is one of the moments that in his entire history, that Guy Gardner is probably best known for, is where Batman got fed up with him and knocked him out in one punch. Now, it says a lot about a character, when one of the things they're best known for is being so annoying that another character knocked them out. But with that said, Guy has really had quite his own moments of being really cool, really awesome, and I do think that shines through ultimately with this character. But we're going to talk a little bit more about that later on. Let's get into the overall plot of this episode, which is really just sort of picking up the pieces where we left off at the end of the last major story arc and the end of the battle with the Red Lanterns. So here, Hal, of course, comes back to Earth, and our big message here is that life has moved on without Hal. You know, it's always sort of a question of how in the world does Hal Jordan keep his job, even if he is dating Carol Ferris, given all the time that he spends running around in space? Well, in the comics, this is always just sort of usually hand waved away. Not here. Hal's been gone months, and, you know, as Carol says, she does have a business to run. So, of course, Hal has lost his job. You gotta wonder who's actually been paying the rent on his apartment. Does he even have a place to live at this point? But anyway, and then, of course, he also finds out immediately after that the Guardians have replaced him with Guy Gardner. Now, it's a concept in the Green Lantern comics that was introduced several years back that each sector of space has two Green Lanterns, and they serve as partners to each other. That doesn't seem to be the case yet in the animated series, but I have a feeling that might be where they're going with this. Actually, no, wait, what am I saying? At the very end of the episode, Hal is promoted to the Green Lantern Honor Guard. Okay, I clearly was not thinking 100% on that one. Although, for the record, in the comics, Hal Jordan's partner is actually John Stewart. But I don't think we'll be seeing him quite yet, if at all, in this series. But we'll see. Anyway, we pick back up with talking about the Manhunters. Now, these guys were mentioned several times the last time around, and Hal quite clearly says to Guy that these were the ones who were responsible for exterminating all the life in, I forget what they called it in the earlier series, like the Forbidden Zone or something really ridiculous like that. Look, I read the comics, okay? So as far as I'm concerned, it's called Sector 666. So anyway, now the interesting thing about the Manhunters is that here their thing is they want to destroy emotion. They see emotion as the source of, you know, evil in the universe. You know, no evil shall escape my sight, no man escapes the manhunters, and all that. Which is kind of the really the flip side of what we've been dealing with in this series so far. Because so far we were dealing with the Red Lanterns, who were, of course, driven by emotion. They were driven by rage. So here we have this new story arc starting off with the Green Lanterns having to face exactly the opposite. At first they're battling emotion, and now they are battling the lack of emotion. And it's interesting that neither one of there is possible to present both of these as bad. Having too much of an emotion is bad. Having no emotion is bad. As always with so many things in life, of course, the balance is the key. You know, temperance, finding the path between emotion and dispassion, I guess is the best word that I'm looking for. So again, this does present, you know, a very interesting contrast for us to deal with. And of course, it's also interesting that one of the major emotions that Hal is dealing with in this episode is, of course, maybe not quite rage, but certainly no small amount of anger. So yeah, you know, little ironies abound if you're just willing to pay attention to them. Now, the Manhunters in this episode are presented as formidable right up until it gets to the final act, and suddenly the heroes need to be able to defeat them. So of course you can, you know, smash the Manhunters with, you know, big pieces of rock filled with stuffed to the brim with spikes. You can drop a mountain on him. But when there's only about a couple of minutes left in the series, suddenly it becomes possible to just smash them to pieces with a Green Lantern ring. Yeah. So I have to ask, okay, why the heck couldn't Hal and Guy do that back in the tomb, other than the fact that the show still had several minutes of airtime that it needed to fill? Well, folks, I got no good explanation beyond the show still had airtime it had to fill. And yeah, I really do sort of hate that sort of thing in storytelling, where it's like, well, wait a minute, why is this suddenly effective when it didn't work 5 minutes ago? You know, that's just how it is sometimes. But anyway, let's see here. Yes. Speaking of the Manhunters, yeah, it was interesting that the way they were going after the helicopter. Well, why didn't you guys just shoot the helicopter? I mean, it's established you guys can shoot lasers. Why are you going over there to personally, you know, kill the reporter and the helicopter pilot and the cameraman with your bare hands when you could literally just look at them or point your little staff thing at them and kill them from a distance? Oh yeah, because, you know, we can't have people dying like that on this sort of a show. You have to do it the stupid way so the heroes can stop you. Again, this is another one of the things that I really hate in fiction. Now, there is a certain amount of stuff that I am willing to hand wave or just say it's that way because this is a kid's show and you can't do that. But we've seen the Manhunters murder someone in the first early minutes of the show. So, you know, really, how is this that much worse? But you know, that was kind of a fade to black death, while blowing 3 people up on camera is slightly different. Again, we do always have to keep in mind that this is a kids show at the end of the day, and by the standards of American animation, a fairly violent and at times rather dark kids show. You don't really see, even today, people dying that much on shows aimed at children. Granted, there are exceptions, of course, shows like Avatar: The Last Airbender and The Legend of Korra. But in regards to, you know, death and murder on animation aimed at kids, America is still noticeably lagging behind Japan on that one. But anyway, one other thing I do want to point out, of course, is the if you're paying attention to the sign in this episode that said McDuffie's. This is, of course, a shout out to the late Dwayne McDuffie. Venerable comics and animation writer, did a lot of work for DC, did a lot of nice stuff for Marvel, who passed away not too long ago, very suddenly. A lot of fans, including myself, were very sorry to hear that. And this, I think, is really a nice way of, giving a little nod to his memory. Although the episode of Ultimate Spider-Man that was, I think, that was quite explicitly dedicated to McDuffie's memory, I thought was much better done in that regard. All right, so let's pop back and talk about Guy for a minute. As I said, his being a dick is noticeably toned down for this episode, but a lot of what makes Guy is still there, and I like the way that he's just blatantly screwing with Hal by pretending to think that he's just a fan, even though Guy has seen Hal flying and using his Green Lantern ring powers. So seriously, Guy's not stupid here. He is deliberately dicking with Hal just for the fun of it. And I do feel the need to point that out because I'm sure that's going to explicitly go over the heads of some people out there. And I do like that Guy specifically mentions Ann Arbor. Now, one of the things that's established about Guy in the comics is that he graduated from the University of Michigan, which is, of course, in Ann Arbor. He's made reference to this several times. He even got there on a football scholarship, and again, we see a nod to that in this episode. So that, just his interplay with Hal, and the fact that he and Hal got into a fight. I have to point out here that this is two superheroes having a brawl over an entirely personal matter in the middle of a major city, thus putting who knows how many innocent civilians in danger for no other reason than they don't like each other. I think every superhero needs to be issued like a little card with great power must come great responsibility written on it, that they are required at all times to carry around in their wallets to remind them not to do stupid things like this. But, hey, reckless endangerment of the public is also, it's just one of the perks that you can get away with when you're a superhero sometimes. Now, anyway, one more thing to say about Guy. He's, of course, voiced by Diedrich Baker. He's best known to folks of superheroes as the voice of Batman on Batman Brave and the Bold. He was also, if I recall correctly, the voice of Zeta on the Batman Beyond spin-off The Zeta Project, which was actually a pretty interesting show that unfortunately didn't really last all that long. But to the vast majority of people out there, he's probably best known as Oswald on The Drew Carey Show. And he's definitely turning in a really great performance here as Guy. He's obviously enjoying playing this character, and Guy is, of course, really well written. I mean, even if he is toned down, the real spirit of the character of Guy Gardner really shines through. So, overall, this episode, it's definitely a good one. It felt really nice to come back to Green Lantern after, this nice long break we've had from the show. Just really step right back into it and really feel like, okay, there's a major new story that's getting started. We're really kind of we're giving the characters like Razor and Aya a little moment some time off to the side so we can focus back in on Hal, because at the end of the day, this series is about Hal Jordan and his adventures. And of course, we're introduced to a really important character from the Green Lantern mythos, really well done. We've got a new, very serious threat looming. I don't want to say anything right now about the villain who seems to be behind all this. I just don't want to talk about that quite yet. I don't want to spoil too awful much for people who are not familiar with the comics. So when some more info is out there about this guy, then I think we'll have a nice long chat about him. But I just don't think I could really say very much right now without spoiling a bunch of stuff or potentially spoiling stuff for people. Anyway, folks, that's all I have for this episode. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. You can, of course, follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi. Just so you know, as soon, and I mean immediately, as these videos are uploaded to YouTube, I send out a tweet letting you guys know about them. So if you want to be able to watch these videos just like as soon as they are possibly ready, definitely follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi. And until next time, take care and have a good one.